Hello and welcome to Cinemate, and we are finally here, my non-spoiler review for Avengers Endgame. Endgame is the 22nd film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and the culmination of all the films that came before it. Now, I say this is a film, but it's not. It's a celebration of all things MCU. This movie is not just a sequel to Infinity War, but a sequel to every prior MCU movie. Now, this film had the monumental task of living up to Infinity War and giving us a satisfying conclusion. And so does it do that? Absolutely. This film manages to continue the story set up in Infinity War and end it in a way that doesn't detract from the previous film, but actually adds to it. It's both satisfying and surprising. The MCU manages to somehow up the epicness of each film. When we first saw the Avengers team up, it was a fantastic feeling, or when we first saw them all fight each other in Civil War, or when Thor appeared in Wakanda in Infinity War, and it amazes me how the MCU constantly manages to bring us moments like these, even 22 films later. Some of the criticisms people had from Infinity War are solved here, such as spending more time with each individual character and having stakes that feel like they last. It's hard to talk about this film in non-spoiler, but that's a good thing because it means that this film has stakes and it has surprises, which is what you want from this film. This movie has a good mix of what you expect and what you didn't expect, and some of the things maybe you didn't want to happen actually happen, but they happen in ways that make you love what they do with it. I'd recommend seeing this film as soon as possible before you get things spoiled. The atmosphere in the cinema was amazing. UK cinemas are usually quiet the whole way through, but there were multiple moments where people clapped and cheered. This film had some of the biggest laughs in the MCU ever, and when the heavy moments hit, they hit hard. Now let's talk about characters. Every film, Robert Downey Jr. managed to bring something new to the role of Iron Man, and I loved what he did in this one. Chris Evans was great as usual, and it was nice to spend more time with Cap in this film. The film really focuses on these two characters, and considering they are the figureheads of the MCU, it makes sense to have Endgame focus on them. Hawkeye and Black Widow also have great arcs, and coming out of this film, Hawkeye was probably my third favourite Avenger, which is a fantastic achievement. If you're worried about Captain Marvel coming in and saving the day, don't worry about that. The focus is not on her, and she's used well, but she's used sparingly, and she does not take the focus of the film away from the main Avengers. Every actor in this film was great, but there were some characters I wasn't too keen on what they did with. I found what they did with Bruce Banner to be mixed. At the start, I thought what they were going for was too comedic and too goofy, but by the end, it really paid off. However, with Thor, I do not like what they did with him. Going from one of the best Avengers in Infinity War, in this film Thor is reduced to a joke, and not even making the joke, he is the joke. And yes, the joke was funny at first, but it kept getting repeated, and this got old. And his arc didn't pay off for me, so this was disappointing. And also Thanos, we don't get much time with him. It makes sense because the focus is on the Avengers, but I would have loved to have spent more time with him, considering how good he was in Infinity War. The pacing of this movie is incredible. It does not feel like 3 hours, and it's very pacey. Things kick into motion immediately, and it assumes the audience is on board for the ride. It doesn't treat the audience like they are stupid, and it assumes you can follow some of the more unusual concepts being dealt with. This film keeps you on the edge of your seat. Most movies you can second guess what's going to happen next, but with this film you really can't, and that works great. For me, the start of the film was great. However, after about 20 minutes we start to see some significant changes that I wasn't a fan of. Some I really liked and some I didn't. As I mentioned earlier, particularly Thor and the Hulk I thought was weird. However, as the second act kicks in, you adjust to the changes and things start to fall into place and gives you more of the film that you wanted. However, my only problem with the second act is it's significantly more humorous than the first act. While the first act is more somber, the second act is more hilarious in tone, and they don't blend that well, considering the circumstances. The first two acts of this movie are more science fiction than superhero, which was interesting to see. However, as you get to the third act, you will have no criticisms. The third act of this movie is complete and utter comic book perfection. It gives you everything you wanted to see and things you didn't know you wanted to see, and you will be on the edge of your seat the whole time. It will make you feel every emotion, and your life will never be the same after seeing it. In all seriousness, the third act of this film is something else, and it's a complete filmmaking achievement and worth the full price of admission, and concludes the MCU as we know it perfectly. Although there was less action in this film than Infinity War, I thought the action was better in this movie. It was more personal and choreographed better, like we have seen from the Russos before. It felt more balanced and more imaginative, and it was awesome to see this. Now, as I mentioned before, this film is very humorous at times, and although it was never used in a way that took away from the drama like some MCU movies, it certainly does feel like a lot. The Russo Bros MCU films normally have a more subtle humour to them. However, this film was far more blatant, which I found surprising. And when the jokes work, they really do work. Some of the biggest laughs in the MCU. However, when they don't, it feels like the jokes weren't needed. As I mentioned earlier, I wasn't a fan of what they did before, and his running joke I found got old very quickly, even though it was getting a lot of laughs the whole time. Although this film isn't perfect, I don't think any MCU fan will leave the theatre feeling disappointed unless they went in with crazy expectations and crazy theories that just weren't realistic. So Endgame is a fantastic sequel to not only Infinity War, but to all the other MCU movies, and actually manages to retroactively add more depth to some of the previous films. It's not a part 2 to Infinity War, and it's earned its place as a completely separate film. It is a conclusion to an 11-year saga that is not disappointing and manages to meet and even exceed your expectations. Although it has some strange choices in the first act that may take some getting used to, and maybe too much humour considering the circumstances, it does not take away from how epic and satisfying this film actually is. I'm not exaggerating when I say the third act is perfection, and it's the best hour of an MCU movie ever. It really does conclude the last 11 years of films we've grown to love, and it's so surprising that they pulled off a conclusion that was so satisfying, and I loved it. And so I would say Avengers Endgame is, of course, cinemazing. Seriously, go see this film as soon as possible. You do not want anything spoiled. There are so many great surprises here, and kudos to the marketing team for not spoiling any of the big moments that in theory would have been great to show in the trailer. The trailers are edited a bit to trick the audience, but nothing is ever added in the trailers like they were in Infinity War. Small details are only edited to trick us. So comparing this film to the rest of the MCU is hard after one viewing. Civil War is probably still my favourite. It still has better action choreography and better character moments, and this film doesn't top that. However, the final battle in this movie is better than the famous airport sequence from Civil War. However, my second and third spots would both go to Avengers Endgame and Infinity War. I'm not sure which I prefer. Infinity War is more consistent and has a tone that I prefer. However, Endgame has much higher highs and is so satisfying, but it has more problems. Infinity War is probably the better film, but Endgame is the better fan experience. As I said earlier, I'd recommend seeing this film as soon as possible. You will not be disappointed. If you enjoyed my review, be sure to like the video and subscribe to my channel for more videos like this. And also feel free to head over to Twitter and follow me at Cinemaze channel for more updates on me. As always, thanks for watching Cinemaze, and more videos coming soon.